Good Wednesday evening, everybody. It is Wednesday, September 24th. It's 7:30 p.m. and you are watching Direct Line Live. I am your host, Jackie Saxton, along with my co-host, Mark Unkefer. And tonight we are joined by the Mayor of Frostburg, Todd Logsdon. What's up, Todd?
Hey, how's it going? I'm having a great time up here. It's chilly, I can tell you that.
And so you guys get fall like about 2 or 3 weeks before we do, because I think it was like 80 degrees yesterday here.
It has been fall for a while. Yeah, a couple weeks, I'd say.
So, I mean, we don't have anything, I think, overtly political to talk about, but it has been a fairly busy week in politics. I think that the most impactful thing to happen this week has been the Charlie Kirk funeral, the memorial. And I'm curious, did you get to watch any of it? Did you watch all of it? What was your take on it?
I had it. I will say I didn't watch it all wall to wall. I had it on. I did catch some pieces of it, and I think it was a fitting tribute. I think it was something that Charlie himself would have found to be, that he would have felt, I think, about himself, that it was undeserved, that or even just surprising that many people could fill the stadium, and twice that many over again outside in the overflow crowd. Just to see that he impacted that many people's lives in such a meaningful way that they felt compelled to go and be there as part of that, I think is just testament to his vision, but also his message and the way that he delivered that message. And I think it's just really, really impactful. I will say I was a little disappointed with some parts of the service. I felt that I really wish that Mrs. Kirk would have been the last one to speak. I felt that her message really resonated the most. I wish that she would have spoken last. I think it would have been a good note to end on. That's certainly not a criticism of the event in any way, but I felt that, I don't know, I think the president spoke maybe a little too long and kind of said some things that were out of character for a funeral, whatever. But overall, I think it was a very touching event, and I think that Charlie himself would have been, like I said, moved that it even happened.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, it was a very on-character speech for Trump, but I think that clip that's playing over and over again, and probably the one that had me, like, busting down in tears, was her just saying that she forgave the, I mean, I don't, that must make it really hard to be a Christian. Like, I thought it was hard to be a Jew. I could never do that.
I was going to say, it's interesting to have gone through the whole process since he was assassinated, to see just how broad the division is within the country in terms of responses. And, you could pick and choose one particular individual and say they were simply out of touch or weren't familiar with Charlie Kirk. But really, the bottom line is half the country just thought Kirk was just kind of almost an alien figure, believed the worst about him, and as opposed to the other half of the country. And it's just a fascinating place, unfortunate that we are in our society. We could probably talk more about it, is really how little most people outside of sort of conservative politics understand about Kirk and Kirk's appeal. But
well, to your point, Mark, though, one of the things two things I found surprising in a positive way out of all this is, first, the number of people who, after Kirk's death, went and actually watched his videos full on and realized, oh no, he's actually not, like, they kept cherry picking his clips and not playing the whole context. So the number of people who actually got the full story after the fact, and two, the number of people who showed up to these vigils in Maryland. There was a vigil in Southern Maryland last night. I mean, obviously a more conservative county compared to here, but it had well over 100 people at it, and a lot of young people. So
we had one in Cumberland too that happened, and it the same thing. It drew a crowd of well over 100 people, I would say. Now again, more conservative area, but still Cumberland, as far as a population center, it's the biggest city in Western Maryland, but it's not a big city at all.
Right. So it gives me a little bit of sliver of hope that Republicans are really starting to come out of the woodwork now and be like, okay, we can't afford to be quiet anymore because they're just picking us off now.
And to piggyback on something else that you and Mark were saying too, in the immediate aftermath of the event, when everybody felt compelled to go on and everybody paid tribute and everybody said, this and that, and this is what they felt about Charlie, I was surprised by, like you said, this sort of dichotomy of responses. And it wasn't even just, conservative and liberal, Republican, Democrat. There were a lot of Democrats, I think, that felt that saw what we saw and felt that a political assassination like that's something that's unacceptable. And I'll say two particular incidents things that I remember in the day or two after it. So I did the same thing everyone else did. I went on and made a heartfelt tribute of what I thought Charlie meant to me and that kind of stuff. The next day when I went to work, of course, most people know I'm a teacher. I teach in the public school system in Allegheny County. So the next day I went to work, and a colleague of mine who I frequently spar with politically and who frequently is critical, like rabidly critical of Republicans in general and Trump as Hitler and these terrible things, said, we arrived in the parking lot the same day, and he said, Todd, I was really touched by the thing that you posted, the tribute that you posted, and I couldn't agree more with the sentiment that you made about political violence and this and that. A couple of days later, I play in the community orchestra here in Frostburg. So we had a performance with our community band, and there's a lady who plays in the band with me. She's an older lady. She's probably in her mid-70s. She's homosexual. She's super, super crazy liberal. I shouldn't say crazy. I'm contributing to the thing. I shouldn't say that, but she's super far left. And again, we frequently spar. And she made a comment to me at the beginning. She said, I read the post that you made and I didn't want to say anything online. She said, I would never condone political violence. And I certainly think it's terrible what happened to him, but I can't say that I'm sorry that that person who had these hateful messages is gone. And I said, well, what do you mean hateful messages? And I said, she said, well, my personal background. I said, her name's Nancy. I said, yeah, Nancy, I know, we've talked about this and I don't feel any, there's nothing to think about that. That's an old story. I know, but I can't imagine that someone in 2025 would advocate for stoning gay people and that would be supportive. Right. I had the same reaction. I said, Nancy, you cannot possibly think that is what he said. Well, that's what I heard. I said, well, did you hear that from somebody else or did you hear that from him? I said, I would encourage you to go back and watch this video. And I said to her, here's 10 right off the top of my head. I found that watch these. I would encourage you to see that you've been misinformed. And the next day she contacted me and she said, Todd, I think you're right. She said, I think that I was misled about this. It's a shame that it came to that, but.
Yes, Stephen King had to issue a public apology for the same exact comment.
Yeah.
And I think we can have a really robust conversation about this because I've heard Republicans on both sides come out differently on the Jimmy Kimmel suspension. So I think it gives us a really good topic of conversation on the First Amendment and the absolutism of the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. And I think where a lot of the controversy is, did they take Kimmel off the air because of companies like Sinclair saying, we have an issue with this, we're not airing it? Or was it the pressure from the Trump admin and the FCC saying, oh, this is not okay, you need to kind of pressure them to take him off the air? Because I can see where Trump may have muddied the waters with that comment, and it very well may have been a business decision with Sinclair, especially because Kimmel's been losing that money for a long time. So what's your take on that, and was it the right decision for them to put him back on the air?
So my take on this is it's kind of nuanced. I agree that there is a huge difference between if that's what Sinclair's decision is or if that's what if they're getting pressure from the Trump administration. But even so, let's walk down that road for a second and say that they are getting pressure from the Trump administration to censure that, right? Obviously, that would be clearly and blatantly in violation of the First Amendment, the government trying to censor that. But even at the same time, Sinclair and by virtue and by a larger extent, ABC and the Walt Disney Company if they felt that way, if they felt that the government was putting undue pressure on them and it was a First Amendment violation, the federal judiciary exists for just that reason. There have been cases, First Amendment landmark cases that have come up. And if Disney felt that strongly about it, if they felt like standing by their man and saying, this is what we want, Disney has deep pockets. They could get, they could take that to the federal judiciary and say, the government has infringed on this, even if it's true. And I don't believe that it is true. I think that it was a business decision. I think that a lot of these larger corporations that have stuck behind this woke mentality and have stuck behind towed the left line. I think some of the big wigs, the people that run these businesses, are starting to see the financial impact of it. And even if maybe they don't have the backbone themselves to stand up and say, I don't want this to happen anymore, if they can put dollars in front of it and they have a reason other than I don't like it, if they have a reason to go in front of them and say, yeah, Kimmel's losing us money, we're gone. But even, like I said, even if it was a First Amendment thing, if Disney feels that strongly about it, sue them, take it to court, and then win.
Well,
and then if you do win, you get a huge precedent, and that would be egg on Trump's face that he couldn't wipe off. But they don't believe that. They aren't willing to do that. They're not willing to stand behind their man, even if it is government pressure, because I think that, quite frankly, they agree with it. They agree with Trump.
Well, if I could, though, I did a little research and did a piece for Direct Line News about this, doing the FCC piece. And there is a long history. First of all, there's a long history of political figures contacting the FCC and say, we don't like something a particular broadcast licensee is doing. Mm-hmm. And in particular, Sinclair has been the target of a lot of that, including in 2004, 20 Democratic senators sent a letter complaining about Sinclair's news operations, specifically having to do with the documentary they did with John Kerry. But beyond that, there are subsequent ones. There are about 4 other ones that I identified. Ironically, one of the ways I found that all was in a footnote to a dissent that Brendan Carr did a couple of years ago, who kind of listed all of these. There's a long history of Congress and others raising this issue with the FCC in an effort to get things differently. So, part of the First Amendment is Sinclair's got a First Amendment right, as does Nexstar, in terms of who they want to put on. Jimmy Kimmel wasn't stopped from saying anything. What the issue was whether or not he would have a platform on those particular stations. So I certainly agree that it's not appropriate for the FCC to do it. I think Brendan Carr's comment was very limited, was kind of focused on there's a broadcast standard. If you're promoting misinformation, unarguably the misinformation was when it was suggested that the alleged assassin was a MAGA person. That was misinformation. And that would have been inappropriate for a licensee. But of course, I think snowballed well beyond that particular issue since afterwards.
Well, and I think too, you touched on a good point of there. Kimmel has the First Amendment right to say whatever he wants, but the employer has the same First Amendment right to choose to associate themselves with that remark or not. And anybody who has ever had a job knows that your employer does and can restrict what you do. You are not allowed to wear political advertisement. A lot of places, you are not allowed to wear political advertisements when you go to your job. You're not allowed to speak politically on certain things. I teach in the public school system. I mean, the restrictions that are on, especially government employees. I know that this is not government employment we're talking about, but your employer does have a right to restrict your speech when you are on their dime. If Jimmy Kimmel, the private citizen, in his private Twitter account goes out and says whatever he wants to say, Sinclair can't do a whole lot about that. But when he's on their show that they're paying him to be on, they absolutely can do that.
Well, and it's going to be interesting. We kind of do get a take, too, to see if it really is a business decision, because Nexstar and Sinclair are still refusing to air Jimmy Kimmel's program on their stations, and that covers about a quarter of the country, a quarter of the ABC affiliates. So it will be interesting to see if they choose to pull him again. based on the decisions by Nexstar and Sinclair. So we'll
Yeah.
keep an eye on it.
Well,
I want
I'll
to,
hazard,
yeah,
I hazard to guess that we won't see Kimmel on past May.
yeah. I think they
Um,
won't resign. I don't know when his contract's up, but I don't think it's getting re-signed.
It is up in May. His ratings have been down dramatically. We talked about, to me, Disney is sort of one of the poster childs of companies that are less interested in audience and more interested in sort of political performance. I was struck by one of the news stories that suggested that one of the quote motivating factors in putting Kimmel back on the air was that Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, was worried that a fundraiser that was going to be held at his house was going to be canceled because people were mad at him for what Disney was doing, and it struck me as sort of evidence that Disney was not being run for shareholders, but was being run for the sort of benefit or consideration of the senior management of Disney.
Well, I would say the lefties are taking credit for it on the internet. They're saying it's because they all canceled their Disney Plus subscriptions.
Hey, listen, I was going to say that is one of the things that all America can come together on, because Disney, you should cancel Disney if you're a conservative, and if you're a liberal and you want to get Disney Plus, and if you're a liberal, you could do it. But what really would do it is if you get and again, I'm not a sports guy, but where Disney really makes what money it makes, and it has not done well in the last several years, is on ESPN, on the carriage rates on cable. So if you could figure out a way to undo that, you probably could hit Disney where it hurts.
Yeah. So I want to spend a time on a local issue. And this one hits me really hard, guys. October 1st, there are 430 new Maryland laws going into effect. The worst one of which is going to be they're adding all these new traffic speed light cameras and getting rid of right turn on red in a lot of places, and they're raising the speed limit fees up to $425. Now, I happen to have a lead foot, so when I file for bankruptcy, you can blame the state of Maryland and their new speeding laws. So what's your take on all this? And I honestly, I don't even know what the other 339 are. I'm focused on this.
Well, I mean, I think that the state is obviously doing anything they can to squeeze any dime anywhere they can. This is the only organization I've ever encountered in my life that makes hand over fist more money than they did last year every year since 1776, I'm assuming. Every year they bring in more money than they brought in last year. And every year they say it's not enough. We're $1 billion. We're $3 billion short. And everything, and Mark, you've been around long enough certainly to know, every new thing that comes along, we're gonna create the state lottery, and the money's gonna go to education, which it does for 4 or 5 years, and then it sort of, through osmosis makes it to the general fund, and then we're gonna bring casinos along.
So
go ahead.
Here's my hard-hitting 60-minute question for you.
Yeah.
Does Frostburg have any speed cameras?
No.
At your one stoplight?
We absolutely do not. We do not have speed cameras. That's not going to happen as long as I'm in charge. We have 15 city cops. There's like 3 or 4 on shift at a time, and that ain't happening.
Yeah, I mean, the other one that's really, I think, frustrating a lot of people is the other big issue going on right now is people can't afford their energy bills. They're just making them way too expensive. So, of course, the almighty and so friendly Westmore solution is to give us $80 a year in rebate. That's going to help so much for people's $300+ energy bills, since they're the ones that shut down all the energy,
Right.
in the state to begin with.
Oh, we certainly know all about shutting down energy. My God, we can't mine for coal anymore. We can't frack. We can't get natural gas. We can't even build any new natural gas infrastructure with what we do have. They don't want us to use gas stoves. My home, the home I'm sitting in right now, is heated with all electric, not because I wanted it that way. That's the way we bought it. I actually tried to get gas plumbed into the home whenever we first bought it, and Columbia Gas told me it was going to be $28,000 to get it from the street into my home. So, but my average utility bill per month is, I think my average electric bill is $340 or $345, which is just outrageous. I mean, I don't know how people live this way. And it only continues to get worse. We take away more and more resources. They actually closed an electricity plant in Allegheny County last year or the beginning of this year. We actually had a power plant because it was coal-fired, and we all know that coal is a four-letter word in Maryland. A coal-fired power plant closes, so we have less supply. And what we are getting, of course, we're trucking everything to Virginia, and here we are left to hold the bag.
Well, you put your finger on a key point, and it's interesting. Wes Moore blames the grid, basically PJM, for the problems, as though the lack of supply and what have you. And you put your finger on what it really is that PJM has to basically buy the power in other states because we don't have sufficient supply in our state. And if we had the coal plants or we had the natural gas plants, we would have the local capacity that we wouldn't have to sort of bid up resources when there's peak demand. But that's the predicament we're in.
Yeah, I mean, my advice to any candidate running for governor or legislature next year, like this is the issue, right? How Hogan ran on tolls that first time around. Every question should go back to, we need to reopen these energy plants. We need to get these bills down. This is ridiculous.
And we need to call them out on the sort of the sleight of hand that Moore is doing of trying to blame the grid for the energy problems when, as Todd already described, the issue has been taking supply offline, not allowing natural gas new plants to go online, of allowing us to have that surge capacity that we need when basically they call it dispatchable at that peak time, when renewables are just not in a position to be able to take up the necessary requirements.
Yeah.
Jackie, what's next?
What's next? Let's see. Well, we're going to keep it, I think, to 8 o'clock. So, Todd, why don't you take a moment to tell us about what's going on this fall in Allegheny County?
Well, in Allegheny County, let's see. We have specific to the Republican Party. I told you guys earlier, we had our Central Committee meeting. We're going to have our Lincoln Reagan dinner on October 11th. Our speaker is Derek Harvey, who's currently a Washington County Commissioner and is a former official in the Trump administration. In his first term, he was a Mideast policy advisor for President Trump. So we're looking forward to having him. The biggest attraction we have really in Allegheny County going on in the fall, of course, is the Scenic Railroad, Western Maryland Scenic Railroad. It's the closest thing you can get to a New England leaf peeping tour without having to leave Maryland. Fall is a great time for that. I would encourage people to come out and visit. Next week here in Frostburg, we are reviving, much to the surprise and I think a little bit of dismay to my city staff. I informed them a couple weeks ago that we are reviving our FSU, Frostburg State University homecoming celebration. So homecoming at FSU is October 4th. I told them about 2 weeks ago that we're having a parade, so figure out how to make that happen. My Parks and Rec director was not very covered his emotions very well whenever I told him that.
Covered, yeah, I like the description. Yeah.
Of course, Garrett County is really the place to be too. Not that I'm shortchanging Allegheny County at all, but Garrett County is the place you want to be in the fall. They've got the Autumn Glory Festival. It's a nationally renowned fall festival that regularly draws in people from all over the country. I would encourage Governor Moore to maybe make a stop there. I mean, Deep Creek Lake, I know, is no Lake Como, but it is certainly certainly a great place to be. To come out and see kind of how the other half lives out here in Western Maryland. So we've got all kinds of stuff going on. We're prepping for winter. It was I think 38 degrees in Frostburg 2 nights ago. So we know we know winter's coming.
Oh, it's like Game of Thrones out there.
Yeah.
Well, I can say from the YR's perspective, we've got events going on all over the state. The big one is going to be our crab feast this Saturday in Graysonville. It's right on the other side of the Bay Bridge. Highly recommend. And then you're hearing it here first. This is breaking news, guys, for all the 10 people watching us right now. We are having our YR Christmas Gala on Saturday, December 20th in Frederick County. It's going to be wonderful. If there's any enterprising candidates out there who want to really ingratiate themselves to the YRs, we have an opportunity to sponsor the open bar for the low price of $3,000. So hit me up. If you want YRs to come out and knock doors for you, this is the way to do it, people. So we'll have more information coming out on that very, very soon. Mark, what's going on at the state party and with the club?
Well, we just had the red, white, and blue dinner last week, and we will also be having our Christmas party coming up in December, but more details about that. I think I'm still not entirely ready for fall, although I guess we're in the fall, but we'll also be having our Pizza and Politics on the first Thursday of October coming up next week.
Awesome.
Mama Lucia's.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. I think this was a really robust conversation. It's been a busy week in politics. You know, on top of that, we've had, unfortunately, yet another shooting at the Dallas ICE facility today. And again, they engraved the bullets with anti-ICE statements. Is that like a thing now, that they're just going to put their intent and all of their reasoning by engraving it on the bullets? Like, is that just the thing? We're going to expect that moving forward? So, I would say the message I will leave everyone with tonight is keep your head on a swivel, be kind to each other, hug your loved ones, and don't be a crazy person. And with that, we will be back next Wednesday with another guest. Have a great night, everybody.
Au revoir.
Well, there's our other guest, right?
Let's go down to Missoni, where Italian cuisine shines.